All right. It's 5:16. We can call the workshop to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Schwer?
Here.
Councilmember Wong?
Here.
Councilmember Nordby?
Here.
Mayor Muggy?
Here. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
So move. Councilmember Schwer.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Norby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Topics.
Thank you, Mayor. One topic on the agenda for this evening, it is the 2025 budget and levy budgets, certify levy discussion. I'll turn that over to our Finance Director, Dan Winnick.
Mayor, council members, good evening.
Good evening.
So, we had a pre-budget kickoff meeting. We've heard from all the department heads. And now it's your opportunity to really look at all of the information that's been presented to you up to date. And I'll kind of walk through stuff here with a PowerPoint. And it's for you to kind of set where you want to be at with that maximum levy. Again, the maximum levy needs to be certified. So tonight I need to get that direction so we can get all the resolutions prepared for September 17th so we can certify it to Ramsey County. Again, it's a maximum levy. What that means is that we can't go up, but we certainly can drop the levy down before we make our final approval in December. And right now, we're scheduled, I think the second meeting in December is when we would have the final approval of the 2025 budget and all of the documents associated with that. So kind of walk you through where we're at. Tonight, we're going to kind of cover the 2025 budget calendar, the proposed levy of what you've seen so far, property tax impact, the proposed general fund budget, the proposed HRA and EDA levies, some budget options that have been presented before, some unknowns that we still, that could really, face our decision here tonight as we move forward. And then open it up for some discussion. You can interrupt me at any point in time and ask any questions as we're going through the presentation, because this is really your meeting to kind of give staff the direction that we need to set that maximum levy. You've been handed out 3 additional pages. There's never any stop in looking at the budget. And trying to come up with ways to reduce the levy and the impact that it has on our residents. And so Brian and I have thoroughly discussed some other options, some of the options that we've already presented before, a couple of new ones that we feel pretty comfortable in trying to get that levy down, maximum levy. It still leaves some options for you into the future as we have further discussions, but we'll get into that too. The budget calendar at a very high level for the budget calendar, as we were seeing, the September 17th is when we're going to certify the proposed 2025 property tax levy. In October through November, we will cover the CIP, enterprise funds, internal service funds, and special revenue funds. We have a truth and taxation hearing that will be done on December 3rd, and December 17th, we will approve all of the final budgets, including the capital improvement program. It'll show you kind of the detail of what we've covered, and today's continuation of any budgets noted above, but we've gotten through all of those. So really tonight is really City Council's discussion and direction to staff for that maximum levy. 17th, again, we'll approve that maximum levy with resolutions. And then on October 1st, we're going to start getting into the capital improvement plan. All department heads will be present at that meeting. October 15th, we'll go through with the enterprise funds. We will need one special in the week of November 12th. Jenny will start to reach out to council members to try to schedule something up on that. Where we will discuss internal service funds and other budgets that that the City Council needs to approve. November 18th is a continuation date if there's any other budgets that we don't get through or there's any other discussion. And again, we'll be looking for direction to staff. We'll have a truth and taxation public hearing on the 3rd and then final approval on the 17th. So right now where we're at, when we combine the city, the HRA, and the EDA, we're at a 9.88% levy increase. That city levy component is 9.62% of that increase. If you remember our pre-budget meeting, we were at a very high level doing some estimates before department heads had submitted all of their budgets. We were looking at about a 7.6% estimated levy increase. A number of things that have changed why it increased is there is a different cost of living increase that's currently in your budget. Later on tonight, you'll have an executive session where you'll be informed by the city manager and the city attorney of where they're at with the union negotiations, what they've heard from there. I think you're going to hear some pretty high numbers or information into that. Got to caution you that it may be more than what we have in the budget. And so that's where we want to be a little cautious on how much or how low we go here on this maximum levy, because again, we can't go back up, but we can come down from there. But this is kind of where we're at right now with that 9.88%. Another big change that we had was that we were presented a street maintenance budget that kind of put up more money on our pavement rehabilitation program. That changed our levy from the 2% to 3.5%. So that added quite a bit of that increase. So the 9.88%, when you start taking into consideration those two factors, really kind of justifies where we were at with the 7.6 very early on. Yet Brian and I, our city manager and myself, are not happy with that, and we've come up with, again, some kind of proposals for you to kind of look at to kind of drop down that maximum levy. But again, the final decision is up to you tonight, but I am going to hold you to giving me direction so I know exactly what to prepare the information for the maximum levy. Right now, just some preliminary information from some cities that are in Ramsey County. These are the levies that their levy increase that they're looking at. And you're seeing the low of St. Anthony at 4.65%, all the way to White Bear Lake that has a 15.7% levy increase. We're kind of in that middle range. You can see the median's 10.38, the average is 10.9. So again, we're not on the low edge, we're not on the high edge. The changes in here that you're seeing in your 2025 budget, our total personnel costs it's been really the biggest driver in our budget, and that's making up that 4.6% of our levy increase. We get a 1% increase when you look at all of our other line items, supplies, contractual services, and the capital component. I got to give our department heads a lot of credit. And the leadership that Brian gave to them and the direction he gave to them in preparing their budgets. They held it as tight as possible. Even though a number of costs have increased, they made reductions in other areas to try to keep it as low as possible. We're going to be seeing some transfers, reduction of approximately $70,000 or 1% levy decrease from our utilities. That's part of that, that we don't do that special assessment, taking up 20% and trying to start to reduce some of those transfers that we do from our utility funds into our general fund. Buildings, you're seeing an increase or a levy increase of 0.45. Transfers, the revenue part, again, all other revenue, is about a 1% levy, is a reduction of about a 1% levy increase. So if you look at everything above, it comes to about 6.5%, and that's where you see some of the other big components to it, the streets, the parks, coming to that 9.6%, which is the city portion. You add the HRA and the EDA, and it comes to that 9.88. This is where we're at with our debt levy. We're seeing the 2016B for the capital improvement refunding that was for the city public works that will be completely paid off. but we're going to end up having additional debt. And the additional debt right now that's planned for 25, 27, and 29 all relates to street reconstruction programming. So at that 9.88, earlier this year, we got to see what the median value on a residential home had changed. The median value went from a market value of $299,000 to $303,500, only a 1.5% increase. As you can see, this is a little bit different than we've seen in the last 3 years, where we've seen some big double-digit market value increases. So the market is flattening out. There was a legislative change that you're going to see in the next line, the market value exclusion. And you can see that for residential homes, that exclusion increases in 2025 quite a bit. So I'll kind of read the legislative change for that the change in homestead market value exclusion calculation, Minnesota Statute 273.13, the exclusion is equal to 40% of the first $95,000. It was before, last year and in the previous years, at $76,000. Then you minus 9% of the value between the $95,000 and $517,200. That's been raised from $413,800. So for a homestead value at $517,200 or more, you would get no exclusion. So you get 40% of that 95, and then it gets reduced kind of like on a sliding table until you reach that 517. So those thresholds have been changed. It's actually quite amazing what it's actually done for our tax capacity for our local rate. Even though our taxable market value has gone up again, not as significant as it has in the past 3 years, our taxable market, our net tax capacity for our local rate has actually decreased. So if we were to keep everything else constant, no levy increase, we would see our tax rate go up regardless. And it's because of this market value exclusion has had that big of an impact onto it. In addition, Ramsey County held a very nice meeting for all the finance directors in Ramsey County, and their assessor was there. There are a lot of pending petitions that are out there, which can have an impact. So we always talk about at this point in time when the assessor does the values, those are really preliminary values. They're not finalized all the way until, I think, the end of November, and then they become final values. So again, the values are here. They can only go one way. They can go down based upon petitions on there. I have not gotten a complete list of what's outstanding onto there, and it doesn't really tell. I've gotten a partial list, but it doesn't tell exactly what is being sought as a market value change. There are a number of apartments that are on that list, which then could have an impact. So if we end up having market value shifting down, in our apartments, then the tax burden is going to be shifted over to our residents. And because we have very little commercial, that's really our other category is really looking at the apartments outside of our residential homes. But this calculation then will take that factor into it, come to a taxable market value, and then it calculates it into a net tax capacity or tax capacity. We apply our rates from 24, 25, and these are calculated based upon this 9.88% levy increase. And you would see that for a median value home in North St. Paul, that the property taxes for all three components for the city would increase $110 for the year. That's an 8.56% increase. To kind of illustrate some of those impacts, because taxes aren't just about one thing, they're not just about levy, they're about market value, they're about any legislative changes. This kind of breaks down. So if we take the final payable for 2024 for that property, it's just under $1,300. We were big winners, or pretty good sized winners, in the fiscal disparities pool. Our fiscal disparities money went up $231,000, or 18% from last year. Equating that to a levy, that's over a 3% levy change to get that type of money, because we're at about $71,000 per every 1% of our levy. That's some of the things that I've been talking about for the past 3 years about, you know, when I first came and shifted a market value bond and refinanced it into a net tax capacity bond, so it would raise our rate a little bit. Why? Because we're a winner on that fiscal disparities pool. It happens the next year because the fiscal disparity pool uses your rate from the prior year. Our levies that we've done to date have been strategically planned by our city manager and myself, and the city council has approved those to be close to that market value increase. Why? Because we want our rate to be holding about the same, if not increasing to some degree. Why again? Because that'll help us in the fiscal disparities pool. So in other words, we got 3% of a levy of free money through that fiscal disparities pool. And you can see on this home that actually reduces that tax $54. That change in homestead exclusion benefit, again, has on this property had a great impact. You know, it's reducing that property tax by $40. The change in value for local rate, it increased $29. And that's where I'm saying that even though our market values have increased, our net tax capacity for the local rate has decreased, which has created that it actually increases the property tax for a property. And then that median value increase of 1.5% increases 20%. You take those three, those are considered tax shifts outside of our control. It reduced the property taxes $44. Then what's underneath the city council's control is the city level levy and the other special taxing districts levy. And that's where this 9.88 will give a $147 increase in the city levy and about $8 in the other for $155. Now, when they get their truth in taxation notice, all they see is what's over to the far right. But this gives you a breakdown for your understanding of the intricacies of the different things that end up happening in the shifts that occur. So if we had a lot more commercial property, with that exclusion would have shifted the tax burden from residents to commercial properties. But again, we don't have a lot of that, so we're seeing kind of a dual impact. You're seeing the reduction because of the fiscal disparities and the exclusion, then you're all of a sudden seeing an increase because of the lower value for the local rate, and then again the market value change to it. The proposed general fund budget, revenues by category, again, you can see that huge dependency on the property taxes or ad valorem taxes. You can see intergovernmental revenues, 20%. You take those two and we're sitting at over 78% of the revenue for our general fund is dependent on taxes and in the state of Minnesota. Expenditures by category, you can see the biggest driving component to it in the general fund is our personnel costs, which are, 64.5%. That's a huge component that is in there. And again, that's really been the driving force in this budget this year. And it's that cost of living. And again, later on tonight in executive session, you're going to hear about, what has been proposed to the city as far as cost of living increases and other such things through the union negotiations. Our proposed levy that all the department heads have gone through kind of shows you from a categorical standpoint. Again, personnel costs are 8% higher. Contractual services are only 1%. Those are really your big driving number factors that are changing in this budget. The proposed general fund budget, if you look by departments, again, you've heard this over and over again. If you take our public safety and you take police and fire and code, That's your biggest driving factor in your budget, which is about 59% of your budget is between those two departments. You can see when you look at it from a recreation standpoint, that's only 0.39% of our budget. Administration is only 6%. Finance is only 3.6. Street maintenance is 12%. You can see everything else is pretty low. Those two are really kind of your big driving factors of the general fund budget. And again, these are the numbers that kind of support those graphs that you just saw. In the HRA, where we've been at is that the HRA levy would be proposed to be $50,000, an increase of $39,000 for 2024. You've heard me say on a couple of occasions that really it's proving out that we may not really need that in 2025, and so you're going to see that it was an option of maybe reducing that. You're going to see in the new recommendation that our city manager and myself put together that we are making that recommendation to you to not increase that $39,000 at this point in time. The EDA is keeping their levy the same at approximately $201,000. These were some options that were proposed to you to potentially lower that levy. And the first one's an add, and it's 1% additional for the parks and a 1% levy increase for buildings. Unfortunately, at this point in time, we haven't gotten the final report for the facility assessment. We're going to be pushing for that so we can have that incorporated into our CIP so we can have those discussions in October. But I think from our indication of what we've seen, it's higher than what we currently have had in our CIP. We just need to know exactly how much that's going to be. And as soon as we know that, I definitely can put together, the city manager and I will discuss, and we can put together some options that we can look at of how we would end up funding that. And then it was thrown out that, transfer or we could budget for it, that, we have penalty charges and also investment income in the electric fund. We could look at all the utilities. Penalties were something that were done for many, many years. They were stopped during the COVID period. They were reinstated by City Council. That went into effect January 1st of 2023. We get a pretty consistent amount of penalty paid each and every year. It's to the tune of about $130,000. That's an option that could be used to fund some things in the general fund. It's not incorporated into the calculation for rates. It's not budgeted, so that's an option for City Council to look at that could end up having a reduction in the levy itself. We've talked about this, updating of the downtown design manual. I firmly believe, you've heard me say it before, it really shouldn't be coming from the general fund. It is currently in there. I would take that out. We do need to have our Economic Development Authority agree with us that they would be the ones to fund it. You heard last week from our Community Development Director, Riley, that it was Councilmember Wong that pointed it out that, EDA is looking at, a facade improvement, and yet that design manual has a lot of facade improvement into it. And our Community Development Director and myself had a conversation before we were going to go to the EDA that didn't happen on those lines. And his thought was that probably postpone that for a year and get that facility improvement program up and running, and we can learn so much more from that to incorporate it into whatever design that happens in the future. But that design of the downtown area really is an economic development type of authority study, because that's really our business district. And so I'm hoping that they officially will accept that and pay for that. And then you've heard me talk about the reduction in the HRA levy. If you were to do all of these changes, Could bring our levy down to 7.12% of a levy increase. Now, that's what we had proposed to you. I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't do that all. And the reason is because we got unknowns, and we got some big unknowns that are out there. Again, we have labor contract negotiations and the impact. Don't know what they're going to be. I have a dollar amount of cost of living that's in our budget. I can't say that out loud because union negotiations are occurring. Our city manager knows what that percentage is. If it's a lot higher that ends up getting settled, we need to fund it some way. So I wouldn't use all of our options to reduce our levy because we're going to need something if it ends up being higher than that. Again, the facility assessment report, we don't have it yet. When we get those numbers in, we have to be able to come up with some sort of way to propose to you of how do we fund that. Part of that may end up being increasing that 1% in a levy. So we don't want to reduce everything and use it all up today and set our maximum levy to a point where we have no room to end up absorbing some of these if we need it. Same thing with the park planning efforts. There's planning that's going on right now. HGA's looking at 3 parks. There needs to be, some more cost information to find out what that impact's going to be. And then, we can run some plans, financial plans based upon whether it's their park dedication fund, whether it's their park fund. Is there going to need to be additional money somewhere else? And again, that's where one of the options was to increase that levy for the parks 1%. So I wouldn't utilize all of that because of these unknowns at this point in time. And some of them could be hefty. I don't know. That's why they're unknowns. So you're kind of in a difficult position. So tonight, what needs to occur is that we need your direction on this maximum levy. So I will cut right to the chase and show you what our city manager and myself have kind of looked at. And a lot of it's consistent with what we've been saying throughout our meetings with the department heads. So we're at that 9.88%. I would take out that update of the downtown manual, which drops it $60,000. I would take out that HRA levy at this point in time. Later tonight in City Council, you're going to get some information on our 2025, and there's information on our 2027 street reconstruction projects. City Council approved a contract with WSB to kind of do, I call it more of a pre-design, get some update those estimates on those projects. You're going to hear tonight that the 2025 project is going up higher than the estimate, but the 2027 is going to be down significantly from what was in our CIP. Morgan from WSB will do that presentation to it. He's done an excellent job. He's got all of our documentation there. So we incorporated that change. Just get that change on Thursday. Here we are. City manager and myself have already thrown through all the numbers, through all of our stuff, and we'd be able to reduce that levy for the streets from the 3.5 to 2.25%. And still be able to maintain the plan that's out there for all the reconstruction and the pavement preservation plan that Morgan had presented earlier. I think it's a very important component. We've realized, and we've been working on it the past 2 years of trying to build that infrastructural funding and starting to build that cash to be able to do some of these things. If you remember, City Council last year took a very bold move, and they transferred $1.1 million from the electric fund to get this program working forward. This past year, we levied 2%. Now we're going to be moving it up a little bit more up to the 3.25. That's a commitment that the City Council has made towards that infrastructure. But running through the numbers with some of the savings that are coming in, through that project, and you'll hear that later tonight, and WSB will be seeking your approval to move to the next step of doing the final designs. And that very comfortable in moving that levy down. Doesn't have the greatest impact, but it's something. And then, just because we were so close, I dug and dug and dug. I wanted to get it down to an even percentage number, and could increase the tax increment excess revenue that we estimate in our general fund. We could increase it about $20,000. We could bring this maximum levy to 8%. There's a couple of items that I'm not touching at this point in time, and that is, do we increase a percent for the parks and increase for the building? I'm also not going to utilize the penalty or investment income at this point in time. If I look at those two amounts, you can see that, it's $100,000 that we could continue to reduce the levy if we want. I'm leaving it out there for those unknowns. And that'll be your decision, I'm hoping for at a later date. Let's not make that now because we don't have enough information. And again, tonight in that executive session, you're going to be hearing collectively as a group for the first time where those union proposals are in. And they're going to have an impact on us in 25, 6, and 7. And so want to hold these off and defer these at this point in time is Brian, our city managers, and my recommendation, and that we have at least some room to play. Because again, we can't go up, we can come back down. And so if the impacts aren't as great, we certainly can use that to reduce the levy, and we have plenty of time. Remember, the final approval of the levy will not occur until December 17th. So if we were to run that and kind of look at that in the same two formats against that property tax impact, you would see that it would have, it'd be about $81 increase on this median value home property, or 6.26, and then again gave the same estimated breakdown between the fiscal gain on fiscal disparities, changing this, that, just so you can have that as comparable data with an 8% versus the 9.88%. With that, I'm done with my presenting piece to it, but definitely open for any questions and absolutely need your direction.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate you. With what you presented here to us today, what are your assumptions built into this with the enterprise funds for rates? Are there any changes assumed with this budget?
I think the only one right now for enterprise rates is surface water, and I've gotten it down to a 2.5% rate increase versus we were at 4.5% prior. Yet when we get into the enterprise funds, and we'll show you the financial plans, and it's not a pretty picture. There's going to be rate increases that are going to be needed in the future years. So you will see that. To buy a lot of this down, and that's where I was only focusing on the penalty and investment interest only in the electric and not in the other utilities. Reason for that, 3 of the other utilities, water, wastewater, surface water, are all greatly impacted on every road project that we do. So again, tonight you're going to see the estimates for 2025 and 2027 on our street reconstruction plans, and there's 4 components. There's basically your streets, water, wastewater, surface water. Surface water has, I think we generate, I think the total revenue for surface water is somewhere over, I'll call it 1.1 million. Look at some of those estimates that are coming out. I think in 2025, it's, well, I can tell you. In 2025, it would be $1.9 million that we would have to bond for just the surface water. In 2027, based upon the estimates, would be about $555,000. Those are some huge numbers for a fund that only generates $1.1 million in revenue. So, I know you've kind of spoken before of potentially, what would be that impact if we could transfer it. We certainly can. It's not going to end it. We are going to have to make rate increases somewhere down the road. So what I've tried to do at this point in time is to minimize the impact for 2025 so we can look at it a little bit closer and buy us at least a little bit of time to look at it moving into the future and trying to address that.
But help me out here. You're the expert. If we transfer penalty money from the enterprise fund to the general fund and then do a rate increase, doesn't that hurt tax disparity? Or wouldn't it be better for the average citizen to transfer the penalty money to a different enterprise fund to keep the rate lower and then thus keep our tax disparity higher? Overall, wouldn't that be a net win for the resident?
Certainly will, absolutely. The question that comes into mind is how high of a tax rate do we get to? And that's been kind of my own problem in trying to do that. And again, it's really, city council's final decision. But we're second highest behind St. Paul. That property tax has a huge impact, and I've heard it a number of times from various residents that have come up here in the last 3 years that are on fixed incomes. Property tax, was established back many, many years ago. It was built on the premise that land showed value or wealth. That's because we were pretty much farmland. That's all changed. So it to me, it's hard. It's not based upon use, where a utility is based upon your usage. And that's just an argument. I don't have truly the answer. I will say, yes, you're absolutely right. The higher the rate, the better we'll do in fiscal disparities. And that's kind of why I want to defer that decision until we go through the enterprise funds, and then you can make that final decision down the road. That's why I didn't include part of that, is because you have brought that up on past occasions.
Thank you. I really do appreciate the explanation.
Thanks, Dan. When I was looking through at the enterprise fund, there's one called, I was trying to find it, gravel. What is that? There was one in
Oh,
there.
there's not it's called gravel tax.
Yeah, what is that?
We get a small amount of, it's an aggregate tax that we get. It's only about, I can't remember even, it's a pretty small amount.
Oh, I was just curious to see, it was only 500 or 300 and some dollars in there.
Yeah.
I was just
there's-
curious.
Yeah, there's not much, but it's pretty consistent. And it's really, it's in lieu of property tax payment for aggregate, and we don't have a lot of it, but it was based upon the, again, it was more established more in the Iron Range, where you had big aggregate deposits that were done, and instead of them paying property taxes, it was based upon the tonnage of their aggregates, and then they would calculate and remit this payment in lieu of taxes.
I know some cities were doing fund for roads out of like an enterprise thing like that too. I don't know if that, as far as a percentage or something off of, forget what kind of fund that is. Franchise, I'm thinking franchise.
Oh,
sorry.
franchise.
Got mixed up there.
franchises. Yeah, we do, we get franchise fees from both, gas, electric. We get it from Comcast. For the most part, it is already collected within the general fund. And then there's a portion of it that's used in our building fund.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. Can you speak a little bit to if you know what Ramsey County is thinking in terms of their percentage?
Yeah, they're in a 2-year budget cycle. I think they've already set theirs. Last year when they did their 2, I thought, if my recall is correct, I think it's either 5.7 or 5.9, which is higher than it has been in the past few years for them.
Yep. Thank you.
A lot to do with labor as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out a little bit more information because they have not had a lot of cost of living increase. They've held theirs, in that 2.5% range, but I haven't seen what their numbers are coming out up. They did give some bonuses, kind of one-time bonuses, especially during the COVID period, that was incorporated into their union negotiations, but they were one time. Other questions, thoughts?
Nobody else? You want recommendations?
I would love recommendations.
I guess I have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Let's say we were all up here very happy with the 8% you could get us to. You know, in a perfect world, 8%. How much would you recommend as a buffer right now, because we don't know about the union negotiation contracts? If we were very happy with this 8%, would 10% be enough of a buffer in your mind?
10% of what?
Well, you said because of the stuff we're going to learn later tonight, not that it's finalized, but if we set the final at 10, hoping you could get to 8, is that 2% enough of a buffer?
Oh, if you were to do a 10% levy versus, I think it should be. I hope. I mean, that's all I can do, I hope. I don't know.
Right now, you got 9.88.
Yeah.
It's kind of the rough.
But I also think you have buffer here too by using those penalties and
Yep.
electric. So that
and
it's,
down, yep.
it's, and again, if you look at the difference, it's not quite the 2%, but
So then that's added, sorry, that's added the 2% for the 1% for the parks, 1% for the buildings, and that 8%. So I do want to speak.
no, it's not in the 8%. Those are other
Okay.
things that we would decide later on.
Okay,
So the delta between that 146 and that 249, which is a 1.4% levy change. So to answer your question, if at 8, I'm saying a 9.5. Oh, I just thought this. So it would be a 9.5 would give that buffer that I'm thinking. And if you said 10, yes, I can accept that too.
well, and I think it's important that we look at the 2%, the add 2% dedicated to the CIP for 1% parks and 1% for the buildings. Parks hasn't come and presented anything. Dan and I were in the meeting last week, and we talked budget there. Also heard the HGA presentation, and then during the conversation with budget, there was a lot of aha moments, like, oh, we do have to plan for this. Dan had to explain a little bit more into the budget, and that's when I should say, it had been determined that, we need to have Riley in here to really explain what was created last year, because there were a lot of deer in the headlight eyes, per se. So I still think that, from my perspective, we look at that 2%, but I don't necessarily think that it needs to be 2%. 1% for the buildings, 1% for parks. I do believe that those can be brought down, and we can start somewhere.
So that 9.88 might work then, the one that they had up at the top then to start with. Because that's what, 1.88 higher than,
Right.
okay. So that's pretty close. I also want to thank you because of the streets. I see they're taking care of Margaret now, and we're getting somewhere as far as some of the street. That's always, since I've been mayor, some of the biggest issues we've had have been our streets. And I know getting rid of the special assessments and not raising anything really cut the legs out from underneath us. So I'm very happy that we're working our way back, and I want to keep that momentum going with the streets. I don't want to, I want to keep that so we're not going to run behind, get behind the 8 ball again. So, that little bit of a cut to go from 3.5 to 325, but, we're still nowhere near, I don't think, what we need to keep our streets up. Is that a correct statement?
Well, again, I'm not the expert that can answer that, but I can't say anything differently. I use what has been given to us at this point in time. Part of when we go through that CIP, we're going to end up having Mark Morgan there, just like we promised, to give kind of some more information on what you can move and change. I don't know if he'll be prepared at that point in time to make a recommendation to go even higher, at this point in time. It may be something down the road that you
That's what I
move
mean,
up.
increment up.
Yeah, so I defer that to the experts. I do want to give a kudos and a shout out to Ron and Randy with the Public Works Department, because they're the ones who have to deal with all of these road projects. And I kind of want to coin a phrase that Ron says kind of half-heartedly. It's like, if you give me no money, I'm perfectly fine with that, because that's less work that I have to do. And so to watch those two gentlemen running here and there, checking on this, checking on that, issue after issue after issue, and they just do an excellent job, and they deal with everything so well. But they're the ones who deserve the credit, and then WSP deserves the credit in putting in, plans together and helping us out with that. So.
I just like seeing us go in the right direction, because that's the biggest thing
And I
with the
think,
city.
and I think we're heading
roads.
in that right direction.
Yep, we just got to keep the momentum up.
And the tough part for, and that was a major part of the conversation for the city manager and myself, is that we're heading in that right direction. We feel very good about that. We feel good about where the budget is, and it's the balancing of impact on residents versus how much do we push in heading in that direction. And so at the end of the day, it's, if I don't have that information that I can substantially point to and say, here it is, I can throw this through something, I can't make that recommendation to do that. You certainly can. I can't give that to the city manager to say, move at a higher levy. If you want to make that maximum levy, that 9.88 at this point in time, because we do have a lot of unknowns. Councilmember Schwer is absolutely right. We met with the Parks Commission. She did a splendid job that night in trying to, she's got a number of new members, and trying to explain and give direction to them, and put them on a pretty fast track, and gave them homework that they had to come back and be prepared for the next meeting to be able to have that conversation. But yes, Riley needs to be a part of those meetings, and Sarah did a bang-up job in leading that parks group. But I think at the end of the day, we're going. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a surprise when we're going to find out that we can't afford everything that our park system wants. No different than I don't think we're going to find out that we have enough money for our facilities. And I've been saying that for many years on both points, just like I did with streets. But we're moving in the right. We made more progress on the streets than we have in those other areas at this point in time. So I'm comfortable with wherever you want to go. Remember, we set the maximum. We can always come back down.
Should we just go around and talk number? Do you mind starting us?
My number would be at 10, hoping we're close to that 8. But to me, we set it at 10 without knowing what the union talks we're going to hear tonight. But that would be my number.
Okay.
So you'd be at that 9.88? 9.88?
10.
Even 10.
Oh, I love it.
I'll go even 10 as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Schwer?
I actually am going to go a little bit higher and do 10.25. I say that because I would like to see us not decrease on the streets and remain the same. I'm unsure with the uncertainties of tonight. And then I'd like to revisit this parks and buildings, and I want to raise it higher with the 2% that's there, knowing that we can play with it and move it. We move that one around. Can always go down, can't go back up.
So you're looking at that 10.25?
10.25%.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole?
Yeah, I don't think we need to be that high. My number would come in at probably about 8.5.
Looking at, when I was looking at 9.5.
So pick a number.
Yeah.
Well, then, I
Yes
don't
or okay,
disagree.
that doesn't mean they're right.
I'd go with 10 with the other three then. I mean, it's, or other two. Sorry, I'm not very good with math here.
Well, 10 it is?
I'm not in alignment, but it's, we're out, that's
Never mind.
fine.
Yeah.
For the
I think it's a
I think
three
the
to two.
maximum.
Yeah.
For the
I think it's
maximum.
For the
too high.
maximum.
Because we still have to face the residents when we tell them it's gonna be 10%, and if we come down at 8, does it look like we're doing our job?
Thank you for your input. Anybody else want to add anything else to that? Still comfortable with your number?
I am. I mean, unless you can wait till after tonight's meeting to get a number from us.
Agreed.
To me, it's a closed session tonight that's given me the
Yep.
information I don't know. If you can wait till after that to get that guidance from us, I'm okay with that. But without having the information we're going to learn at the closed session,
And I think that's valid to say that here. I mean, it's to set it at 10, have the community understand, none of us do know what numbers we're going to see this evening, and to shoot for a lower number. This is the absolute highest right now. We can go lower.
Yeah, just,
Community knows that, but we have to report something to the state.
just to remind you, I've said this before, that when you set that maximum levy, that is what your truth and taxation statements come out as. So that's, even if you go lower somewhere else down the road, that's where you're going to hear from the residents on whatever that maximum levy is, because that's what they're going to see as the impact that there's coming toward, to them. So I don't disagree at this point in time. They want to have that latitude that's available to you. I'm going to just say, to make my life a little easier, if you really want to do 10, let's just use it at that 9.88, since all the documentation is already set that way. But if you want to come lower, I totally understand that. I think that there are a couple of items here that, being at least the downtown design of the $60,000, which reduces it 0.82, that, you could be at 9.06. And again, we're just cutting hairs at this point in time, but,
so I guess I have one more question. How tonight works, we go into a closed session, then we go back into an open session and adjourn, right?
Where's the lawyer?
But, so are we able to give him a number after the closed session before we adjourn?
Because the negotiations are still going on. We can't give anybody numbers yet, right? Because they're still in the middle of it.
We got the numbers back from the building assessment.
Yeah, so they're just kind of getting what the first ask is out of this, correct?
Yeah.
So we just got the first ask, and now it has to negotiate on our side with their side, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then this is just pretty much just their initial number, and then we have to go back as a city. Now, after we talk as council and decide is what number we would like to see, and then it goes back to bargaining, correct? Okay, and that's where it would be then.
Councilmember Kroll, your number was again?
I went 8.5,
Why?
because I think that there's room in the budget. I think that a number was put in front of us that probably assumes some of the increases greater than what we probably started talking at. And I have a list of items that would generate revenue for the city that would be able to bring the number down from that.
Love to hear it.
Okay. Yours was the lowest, that's why I asked.
Then when do we hear that from you as far as then after,
Down the road when we start,
okay?
and I don't have firm numbers on everything yet. I'm still working with staff to gain some numbers.
Okay. Anybody?
To make it easy, I'm happy to change my number to 988 rather than 10.
I appreciate you bringing up that truth in taxation. Kind of spaced my mind a little bit, but that number can be a sticker shock for some individuals when they see it. And then the levy going down significantly can also be like, well, you told me this. So,
Yeah, this is where we're supposed to try to get as accurate, but yeah, it's tough because I've talked to other mayors in negotiations and some of the numbers they're coming back with are huge.
even the numbers we've heard from other cities, they've said that there's probably going to be some reductions in some of them as well. So still unknowns for all the cities.
The 9.88 it is? All right,
I'm comfortable.
you good with that? Well,
Yeah, that works.
it's kind of like gas, even though I got that 99.99 behind it, it just makes you feel really good that you're not getting screwed by that 1/10. Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you see it my way. So 9.88 is what I'm hearing. Documentation will be put together with that as resolution. And again, you can definitely go down.
Yep.
One last shot.
Yep.
Councilmember Cole has talked 8.5. We put together, Brian and I came with an 8. We showed you the options to it. All I need to hear is no, want that 9.88, and we're good, and leave it there for now. 9.88?
Yes, please.
Council, okay.
And I, on my side too, I think it's also means we're gonna sharpen the pencil. I mean, right now, that's worst case scenario, and that's what you have to do when you don't have all the information, but is what everybody's come up with here with different scenarios, how to be able to trim that is what I'm excited to hear, because it's not like we're comfortable or fine with a 9.8. Nobody is. You mentioned at the beginning, you and the city manager, that's too high, but we have to have somewhere, and if there's an emergency, it's like your house, you have an emergency fund if you need it. Hopefully you don't use it, and that's kind of how I see this. If there's absolutely a disaster where we have to do something, but everybody's going to sharpen the pencils and do the best they can to get down. All right, 9.88. Thank you.
I thank you very much. I know this is tough. You've done a lot of work to date for the budget. We still have a long way to go as we go through so many other fun things. And again, the CIP is going to be a big one. But in the levy component to it, the only component that's really in the CIP is the Emerald Ash Borer program, which we've been funding historically in the general fund, and then the $60,000. So the CIP really doesn't have an impact on this except for potential levy changes in parks and facilities. So,
I'd love to get a number someday what the Emerald has cost us overall, just because, I mean, it's just their trees, and who knew 10 years ago that the Emerald was going to turn on you and have the disease, and how much money that cost just as an unplanned thing.
I'll have a bit of an update later in the meeting, council meeting.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah,
All your work.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you very
Appreciate you.
much.
Yes. All right. That is done. Any other business?
Further.
If nothing else, I ask for adjournment, please.
So moved.
So move. Councilmember Cole.
Second.
Second. Councilmember Wong. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Which Wong?
That's why I did it, to prove that I could say the right one. Or did it because I wouldn't have to